So hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Xtra Bytes. And so far, when we started this Xtra Bytes, we did not really visualize that. We did not even think that it will come so far, and we will have so many wonderful speakers lined up one after another. And it's been a phenomenal ride so far. And today we have another wonderful photographer, landscape photographer, and his name is Hans Gunnar Aslaksен. I hope I have pronounced it right, Hans.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad. I think you succeeded quite well, Jassi. Thank you.
So he's from Norway, and talking about him, he's basically a designer, and he's also very enthusiastic landscape photographer. He lives in Larvik, which is in southern Norway. So now, personally speaking, also, since I've been to Norway, I know how beautiful the country is and how beautiful these places are. They're full of nature, and but it is so surprising, and we'll probably ask him that he could pick up camera only in 2016, and why he didn't see anything before that.
Yeah.
So, but he says that he was immediately hooked, and to be honest, if we see that his journey in 4 years, it has been a phenomenal journey in terms of his the kind of progression that he's made with the quality of images that he creates. He understands light so well, and the compositions are all nailed. Not even a single composition you will find where you can find a flaw, and that's been some remarkable journey. So we will also want to know whether he actually is being a designer helps him achieve that. But anyway, so he's a self-taught photographer, and he wants to continue learning by diving deep into this wonderful and exciting world of landscape photography. Welcome, Hans. Thanks for accepting our invite to be on this session and to share your thoughts and your knowledge and your exquisite work of landscapes with all the viewers who are there lined up on YouTube. Today we have panel also is special. So our regular panelists are Sandeep Mathur, we have Himadri, we have Prakash, and we have Som, and we have one special panelist who is a friend of Hans, and his name is, if I'm able to spell it, pronounce it right, Tor Ivar Neis. Pardon me if I have not pronounced it right, Tor. Welcome, Tor, and it's great to have you on panel as well.
Yeah, pronunciation was good enough, and I'm honored to be here.
All right. Okay, so welcome both of you. So Hans, the first question that comes to my mind is that you've been living in such a beautiful country. You probably were born and brought up there. And you had a designer background as well in the profession. But why did it take you so long to realize that photography could be something worthy to do in terms of your, even as a passion?
Well, yeah, I must admit that I wish that I actually had discovered the landscape photography earlier. I must say that, but I've always been loving to be out in the nature, and I've always been on hiking trips, tent trips, and fishing trips with friends and family, and really eager to explore nature and spend time there and to relax and so on. So yeah, I don't know actually. It's some coincidences, I guess, but I was really hooked when I first got into it. So then it's was all in for my sake.
All right, that's interesting. But your journey so far has been kind of phenomenal. You've really suddenly risen to your. So we've not seen your initial work as well. So, but what we feel is that 4 years is too less a time to reach where you have reached in terms of the kind of images that you create. So can you take us through little more into, give us some more insight into your journey? How did you start and how did you proceed, and where did you find challenges initially, both in terms of finding compositions, or you did not even find at all? So
Yeah.
please take us through that. That will be very interesting story to listen to.
Yeah. I have made a keynote presentation that I can share with you, and I can go through all those steps that you mentioned there, Jassi.
Perfect, perfect.
So let's see if I will be able to share my screen with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Do you see this, guys?
Right.
Yeah.
You
You see my mouse arrow as well?
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, we do.
Yeah. Great. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me into this session. I'm really honored to be here, and I think it's wonderful to see that all your guests is such great photographers, and many of them are my favorites. So I'm really humbled to be a small part of this. So I can start out with a little bit about my background. In education, I have gone to art school, and I gone to a school called Westerdal School of Communication in Oslo to be educated as an arts director, to work with marketing and branding and ads and campaigns. And the one thing when I look back that was really important for my photography was my time at the art school. The first year was drawing, a lot of sketching, and the 2 following years was graphic design. So this drawing is from my first year at the art school, and I think this is quite interesting because we did a lot of exercises. We were drawing everyday objects to watch how the light affected the different objects, and how light can shape an object, and how you can, when you start drawing, how you can make a flat object look like 3D. So you can see here are different surfaces. So on this surface, this is metal, and you see that the light here has another approach on the surface than on the paper and on the plastic handles. So we did a lot of exercises learning how to get the highlights to shine and how the shadows could shape the objects and make it look like 3D. What's the expression in English? Shaping the apple kind of approach.
Yeah.
And these principles are actually the same as dodging and burning in Photoshop. So I think that this has been a good exercise for me, and I just use the mouse when I do post-processing. I don't use a vacuum table, but I could actually been thinking of moving over to that and use a pen as well to make it more similar to the drawing bit. But I usually use dodging and burning through luminosity masks, and then you can be a little bit sloppy with the dodging because the masks is so precise. So this is kind of my education. And then I work, as you said, Jassi, as a graphic designer, and this has always been good for me in terms of my photography, because I work with the compositions and the color theory and brand identity, and all that stuff that are quite the similar principles in photography when it comes down to composition, those basics. So I think that my background as a designer has been make my journey into landscape photography a bit easier than for others. Yeah, and I have always enjoyed photography just on a basic level. I brought the camera with me on hiking trips. The first camera I got was this the Fujifilm X-T10, It's just a tiny camera, but I wanted that one to don't take up too much space in my backpack, and I can have it on hiking trips and so on. So all these images are taken with that camera. So I just use it for documentation on the hiking trips and fishing trips, and just taking pictures of the kids and so on. But just for fun, just playing around with a camera, nothing serious. But I always enjoyed it. Then I did a family trip to Vøringsfossen waterfall in Norway. And this is one of Norway's largest waterfall. And this place really made a huge impact on me. And I was so happy that I managed to get a decent shot from that place. And that experience really got me hooked on to get deeper into the landscape photography and try to understand the exposure triangle, how the camera really works, and the post-processing part. And I watched tons of YouTube tutorials, and YouTube is such a fantastic channel for seeking out knowledge when it comes to photography and other stuff. It's just great. So it was that experience in this image and that place that really got me hooked on, really fueled my passion for landscape photography. I think the drop from the waterfall here and down to the valley is 180 meters. So it's very huge. A lot of spray and very noisy, and it was just a fantastic location. So that's the kind of the turning point for me.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe what kind of separates me a bit from the other guests is that I have shot mostly local. I have not traveled to those big and epic locations like Iceland and the Dolomites and Patagonia and so on. I try to make the best out of the locations that I have locally. So I live in Larvik. It's a small town, 2 hours drive south of Oslo. So I live near the coast. And this is just an image from Google Maps. I just wanted to show you that that shows how the coastline is down here. It's full of these smooth-shaped rocks all the way, but it's kind of flat. And one of the challenges is that it lacks strong focal points. We don't have any big mountains down here or something that you can aim for. And so that's been one of the challenges. But a popular place in Larvik to take photographs is Mølen. And Mølen is actually Norway's largest beach of rolling stones. So they got millions of small rolling stones and one big one. And everyone wants to shoot that one. So it's kind of a cool place. So the one thing you see down here is actually so it's a Viking grave, Viking cairn. So it's kind of a historical place. But it's a difficult place to shoot as well. This is a Google Earth shot behind this big stone, and one of the challenges down here is that the focal point is not huge, so we have to get really low with the camera because I want a horizon line to break. I want this rock to break through the horizon line so that they don't touch and that they don't get close to the edge, and so that it creates visual tension and so on. So you have to get real low, and you have to make the foreground important in your shots. So that's why I used wide angle to exaggerate the foreground elements, to point those in, and I also need to get close to the stone. It's quite steep actually when you get behind here, so it's a lot of waves coming splashing in. So you get soaked when you try to photograph here. But I can show you how the image turned out. So
Oh man.
yeah.
That's really something.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this was taken with the Fuji XT10.
Wow.
So here, if you see down here in the foreground, I try to frame the shot with the foreground, and I really like triangles in my compositions. They are pointy and they can lead a direction to the image and lead the eye in to the stone. So I look for these kind of elements, pointy elements in the foreground. So yeah, I remember this one was shared by BBC Earth and so on. So that was really funny. So yeah, I just tried to sketch it up a bit to explain to you how I think about compositions. So again, all this triangle, all these pointers, framing the shot and lead the eye in to your focal point. And of course, the big splash also makes for leading lines. You know, it comes out from the stones, draw the eyes in. So that's yeah, it's a attention-grabbing image.
Yeah.
So, but you know, you get really soaked for this, and these big waves came crashing in, and you actually stand in the water, and the waves goes behind you, and then flows back into the ocean, and then that's also a good moment to take photographs. So one of my best investment is these guys. So that's something that you really need too when you're taking seascapes. You have to get into the water, because you want the water to go past you and then go back again into the ocean to create leading lines. So this is also a shot taken from the same location. And here I also use some of the same principles, but there was a lot of water this time, and so I can actually use receding waves as a river to lead the eye into the stone, into the big splash. So this part of the image is short shutter speed, around 1/4 of a second, I think. And this one is around 1 second. So it's kind of a split blend between two exposures. And this is the third image from the same locations. So yes, I've been to that location a lot of times, but I think it's good to go to a location at different times of the year, and at sunset, sunrise, and see how the light affects the sea and how you can make the most out of it. That is maybe the greatest advantage to shooting locally, that you can easily go out often and when the light looks promising to your locations, and to get a really good feel for it and experiment and so on. So this one is there was a lot of water spray from the big splash. It was a really huge splash, and all this is just water spray that got lit up by the setting sun. And I also was lucky to get these warm highlights on the stone that help leading the eye through your composition from the left corner and curve a line into the big stone.
So there's a question in my mind that you said that everybody is wanting to shoot this stone. So
yeah.
So are there enough spots around this stone from different angles where if there are, or there's always a crowd, or you still get to find quieter moments only with you or maybe a couple of more people trying to shoot some images, or there's a crowd?
I don't think there's a crowd. There's a kind of people are at this place during daytime as kind of, you know, like tourists. But at sunset, there's not so many there. But there are, I guess, there are 10 to 20 photographers on this huge beach, so this is not a problem that is too overcrowded. But I think that I'm one of the few that is actually so close to the waves and so on. The other people stand further back and with the tail lenses and so on to aim at the stone. But I really like to add foreground to this place. I think foregrounds it's really important to me, and I think that since we have a really flat coast, I think that if you don't include the strong foregrounds in these kind of images, I think that there's something lacking. I think it gets a little bit weak, and it's not a strong mountain ridge that you can use the tail and so on and so on. So it's a typical wide angle location.
All right. So another question is that what is the focal length that you used here? Approximate?
Yeah, I use a lot the Fujinon 10 to 24 millimeter lens. That is a great wide angle lens, and I often use it on the 10 millimeter end. So I think that all these shots are taken on 10 millimeter.
And these are focus stack.
Yeah, I think this one I did focus stack, but because I was so close to the stone. But usually when I use the 10 millimeter, I got a lot of depth of field in that one. So I usually just focus on infinity. Then if I am around f11 and so on, I'm pretty good down to 30 centimeters and so on with acceptable sharpness. So it's a crop sensor, so it's got wider depth of field than a full frame. So I try to make things as easy as possible. If you have moving waves and so on, close in the foreground, it's kind of hard to mess around with the focus stacking and so on.
And hence, all these vertical shots, what is the crop factor? What is the crop that you use? Do you work with a typical crop, or it changes from photograph to photograph?
I kind of change it from photograph to photograph, but I think that I have a lot of vertical shots in my earliest images, and I think that it was actually kind of shaped of the fact that I only posted on Instagram as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of aimed a bit for that one. So it's usually vertical shots, but I sometimes had to squeeze them a bit to get in the 4:5 crop that Instagram approves.
Okay.
So on my website, it's kind of more like 2:3, I think, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when did you take this? Which year? Just to get an idea.
I think this was in 2017 or something like that. It was.
Man, in 1 year you were creating such images. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that it really helped to watch a lot of post-processing tutorials and so on. And I think that it was around this time I got into a group on Instagram with Tor Ivarnes, which is here, and Kai Hornung and Mats Peter Iverson and Mikkel Byter. So I was really lucky to get into that group, and they gave me a lot of feedback on my images and the post-processing and so on. So I learned a ton of things from those guys. So I was really lucky to get hooked up with those great photographers.
So you mentioned you were watching a lot of post-processing tutorials. Who were the people who were inspiring you?
I think I started out with Elia Locardi and the f-stoppers tutorial.
Yeah.
Where, what's it called, Around the World or something. Yeah. And I moved on to Ted Gore quite early. I think that was really great, how he used saturation just part of the images, and moves away from global adjustment, and really the smart way to approach the scene. And yeah, Ryan Dyer, and nowadays I really like Alex Noriega's tutorials, and Eric Bennett is really good as well.
Who was the last one?
Eric Bennett.
Eric Bennett.
Yeah. It's great. I think its website is bennettsfilm.com. Yeah, you got some really great tutorials out there, so learned a lot from that one.
Natural hues from Eric. He keeps them natural mostly.
Yeah, I like that. You keep the natural look as far as you can, but I don't mind if you can do big things in processing, as long as the outcome looks natural. Yeah, so I can move a little bit on. This is another location. I don't know if you have probably seen a lot of shots from this location if you have followed me on Instagram. This location is only 5 minutes drive from my home. So this is just a small bay, and I've been here countless times, but this is not an epic location actually, but I think it's if you go there under the right conditions, you can get good shots from there. So that's, as I mentioned before, that's a great thing about shooting locally, that you can head out to your locations often, and you can head out when the light is good. The 2 times I've been to Lofoten, we just have to book in advance, and you have to deal with the weather that's there. So that's big advantage for shooting locally, that the light may be on your side. So again, you have to get really low here, so you get the horizon line below the rocks. We don't want the horizon line to touch the edge of stones and so on. That is doesn't look good and creates visual tension, so we need to get really low with the camera. So I've been unfortunate to destroy the camera from saltwater and a lens as well, but I see it as a steep learning curve. You have to sacrifice something to improve, I think. So what I did with this shot, I did f/22 on the Sunstar, and I shot the whole scene on f/11. And I think that mostly of my exposures are at f/11. I try to. This one is one exposure where the water moves over the rock and slides down. I think this is one exposure. This is one exposure for the rock and one exposure for the foreground. So I use a tripod and I shoot in continuous mode, so I get all the wave action that comes in. And then I can, afterwards in front of the computer, try to pick the pieces that fit, so I can make wave movements that draws the eye through the image and play well together. So that's kind of putting the pieces together is the first step in my post-processing actually.
Hans,
Yeah.
you hear me? Hans, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So the highlights specifically on your images, right?
Yeah.
Always seem to catch some of the sunlight, and the color is typically saturated, right?
Yeah.
Is that something that you deliberately do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. I like to enhance that in post-processing, to work with the light that is already there. So I think actually on this side of the image, the light was kind of strong. So this is actually a bit of the reflected light from the mountain, this rock side. I think that actually turned the saturation a bit down on here to balance it. And on this rock and this rock, I did some color dodging to enhance and bring lives back to the colored light. Then. So I like to do that through luminosity masks that choose maybe lights 1 or lights 2 to isolate the highlights, and then I dodge with a color that fits and make it enhance it a bit more. And I do that through the Luminosity Mask, so it gets very precise. So I don't do so much global adjustment to my images. I like to enhance the spots where I want to. So I like to, yeah, cool down the shadows and warm up the highlights.
I just love the flow of light in your images. You know, it
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Kind
Yeah.
of the visual flow is amazing. So smooth, so effortless. Yeah.
Yeah, the light and shadows.
Yeah, that's very important. I think that in my earlier shots, I think that maybe I have a warm cast in those. So I try to do things a bit differently now and use luminosity masks to cool down the shadows more than I used to before. So this is another shot from the same location. And again, this is just, you know, same location, but just moving some inches to the left or right, you can really change the perspective. So that's a good thing to play with that and get to know the locations and so on. So I use the same technique here. Let's see, I think that this one where the water flows over the rock was one exposure, and this was one exposure to get it move over the stone. I like to play with those details. I use a lot of time to just masking things in and so on. It's important to get it all right the first time, because if it's a bad blend, then it follow you through all the way and you have to actually begin at the beginning again. So take your time with doing these things. So I think that this is one exposure as well, and one exposure for the foreground. So you can actually do that with some light as well. If you take continuous shooting as the light disappears, you can blend in part of the image that has light on it. Or maybe you want to take the light out so that you can lead the eye through the composition in a controlled way. Yeah.
Beautiful, Hans.
Yeah, thank you.
Your images have a hypnotic effect on some of us.
Yeah.
We get drawn into your images, like as if it is trying to pull us into it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's one of the advantages with the wide angle, is that it kind of draws the viewer straight into the image if you're close to the foreground in the elements. So I really like that approach, that it immediately kind of grabs you. So this is another location close to home. This is actually a salmon river. So I'm standing on right down here in the foreground. There's a small wooden bridge that the fishermen stands on when they are fishing. So this was a cold October morning. So I was actually to my left, there was a small cabin where the fishermen take breaks and so on. So actually guys sleeping there, so I have to sneak past him to get up there. So it was really much water in the rivers now. It's just pounding down, and the small wooden bridge that stood on was kind of vibrating a bit because of all the flow in the river was hitting the small bridge. So I used a short shutter speed for the top of the image, and I was hopefully trying to get one of those sharp shooting in continuous mode. And then I used the slower, maybe half a second or so on for the waves, and I guess it doesn't matter if that is a little bit out of focus as well. So I blended in the sharp parts of it. It was really, really cold that morning, and there was a lot of fog and mist that was playing around the river and the forest and so on. So I really liked that atmosphere, and I really like to enhance that even more in post-processing. So I played around with the polarizer as well, and I saw that if I turn the polarizer a bit, I could still keep the misty look, but get some pink clouds coming through the haze at the top of the image, which I really like. I think complements the blues in the water. So that's also a nice place. Yeah, and I also like to try to capture some quiet scenes. There's a lot of moving water in my images, but now I try to also do different stuff so it doesn't, just repeating myself. Try to challenge myself with going to new locations and so on. So this is also a local spot. I think it's just 10 minutes drive or something. So this is obviously in winter, and I really like that the snow gets this pureness to your images and hide a lot of clutters and make them more simplified and more pleasant to look at. And here I worked mostly with to cool down the foreground. So the eye is drawn to warmth and saturated places in your images. So you get this natural transition from cold and into warm. I also like this frozen pond there. This is actually a river that has snow down. There's ice there. And I like that this, I don't know if it looks that to you, but I think that it reminds you of a giant's footstep or something. So I was playing with in post-processing with the light bleed here.
Yeah.
The light, I enhanced that in post. So what I usually do is I use a soft edged brush, and I sample the color, and I go try to make it as bright as possible, and I make the brush small and click one time, make the brush bigger, click again, bigger, click again, bigger and bigger. And then it gets stronger closest to the light source, and it kind of fades out as natural light do. And that's a great way to enhance the light that is already there. So that's one technique you can use in this kind of images.
Hans, I have been like fascinated by the moon for a long time now. And what attracts me to your images more are the presence of the new moon that you use so beautifully. Amazing concept. Like,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then I was hooked up with some guys on Instagram that I regularly go out shooting with, Morten Eriksen and Roger Christensen. They live in a town nearby, so we go on road trips now to seek out other kind of locations. So I'm going to show you some images now from Norway. I've only photographed in Norway. So these places are from around 3 to 8 hours drive from where I live. This is on western Norway. It's a place called Vøringsfossen. This is a glacier lake. You can see the glacier Vøringsfossen up here. And it runs down into this wonderful lake. It's a really beautiful spot. So I saw that this boat was lying here, so I used that as a focal point. And I always try to look for foregrounds, and I think that I managed to frame the shot with this foreground. And all the stones kind of leads and points you into the boat, and then into the backdrop with the big mountains and the light that lights up the sky. So this was there's quite a lot of fiddling around with the composition actually to get this right, because you see this pole here. I didn't want that to cover the river, and same as this, I want this river to be free of the stones here. I didn't want the pole to kind of grow into the boat. So it's I think it's important to try to separate the elements in your shots as good as you can. So it was I think this was technically bracketed shots for the sky. The sky was blown out to maintain details in the shadow, and I blended in darker exposure from the sky in Photoshop. So I always try to do that if I am unsure about the dynamic range. I just do bracketing shots. If I am unsure if it's focused in the foreground, I focus stack. So I do all the things so that when I come home, I have all the files I need. If I don't take any chances, you know, so that's a good thing.
Hans, can you go back to that image?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question was, in such locations, usually the wind plays a spoil sport with the water. So
Yeah.
but I think you were lucky enough to have a windless period for some time, or it doesn't wind disturb you here in such locations?
Yeah, I was actually really lucky. It was just me and another photographer here. There used to be a lot of people at this spot actually. So there was almost no one there, and it was no wind at all. And that boat was gone a week later because someone else has been there. So I was really lucky with the conditions, and I got this wonderful sunset as well. So that was just pure luck.
Amazing.
So yeah, thank you. And this is called Vøringsfossen. It's a waterfall in Hemsedal in Norway. It's 4 hours drive approximately from where I live. I think I actually drove back and forth from that one. It's a really beautiful waterfall, I think, and it was a lot of water in the river at that time, so it was quite scary to go down there. Actually, it was really strong flow in the river, so you did not want to fall into that one. So it was, I think this was a sunrise shot, yeah. So you got the light from behind, and then you got these beautiful rainbows from the water spray in the waterfall. And I really like that the shape of the rainbow repeats the shape of the waterfalls, the twin waterfall. So I think that this part kind of nicely fits together. So
very nice image.
Thank you. So to Ivar, I need to take you to this place. I think that you would really like to photograph here.
Yeah, I would love to photograph a bit more south in Norway. So that would be lovely.
Yeah. Have you just been photographing in the northern parts of Norway?
Yeah, mostly in northern parts of Norway and also Iceland, Faroe Islands. Not so much in southern part of Norway.
Let's see if this can change your mind then. And this is another place you must go to Ivar. This is Åndalsnes in Møre og Romsdal. I think that's 8 hours drive from where I live. This is a mountain called Romsdalshornet. It's quite famous. And this was, I think this was in June or something, and there was a lot of meltwater. So all of the meltwater created these very nice creeks coming down from the mountains, creating this beautiful leading ice that you can play with. So again, on with the wellies and jump into the river and just take a central composition straight on. I really like to play with central composition because there's actually so much going on the side here. So when you got this really strong central composition, then it really ties the image together. So that's I really like that, and I really like the shape of the mountains as well, so that they kind of frame the shot quite nicely.
Hans, where did you stand?
I stand in the middle of the river. There's a little rock beneath here that I stand on, and I'm really low with my camera. So I just stand wiping the lens all the time, taking shots, wiping the lens. So it's a bit hectic, but I really like to place myself, just straight in, just in the middle of it. So that's the way to suck the viewer into
Your
that.
feet must have frozen. Your feet must have frozen.
Yeah. Yeah, I got some wallets now that are isolated. I think it's down to -40 or something. So that's really some really beast of some boots. So yes, it gets very cold.
Hans, just a question.
Yeah.
Compositions are not always favored, right, in landscape. Now, I'm just thinking in my mind, if you could probably, do a little bit of the spherical, probably the phi or the golden circle composition by having a little bit of a diagonal line, bent line going in. I don't know if you have that on the left, right? So maybe composition.
Yeah, it was let's see, I can use the mouse. It was a rock in the center here, and it went creeks down to the left and down to the right. But it wasn't that big creek, so it was a lot of stones and so on. So when I moved to the right, this part of the rocks kind of obscured this part of the river and some of the mountains. So I think that the lines get kind of cut by this part, and the same here. So I think that it was better that they kind of framed it like this, and so that you can get a leading line all the way through the foreground, middle ground, and to the mountain.
Yeah, the symmetry is great on this shot.
Yeah. So I think that I kept on shooting. It was kind of dappled light on the mountain. So I kept on shooting through 10 minutes and so on. So I was then able to blend in this part with light, and this part with light, and this part with light. So that's the way you can use dappled light to your advantage. When the clouds obscure the sun, so that your objects get lit, and then in shadows and lit again on different places. You can take those exposures and align them and blending in using masks in Photoshop to get the light where you want. So that's a good technique to use as well.
That's a wonderful technique, actually.
Yeah, I really like that. So that's a good thing to I get more shots now than I used to when I started out, because now I have more knowledge and know how to use these different kinds of weather to my advantage. And if you shoot on a tripod, you have a lot of options, to get something out of it, to take several exposures and so on, blend things together. And so I use tripods on all of my shots.
All right. Yeah, next question, can you do that? My next question was same thing, because we've seen most of your shots are, your next shot is obviously the landscape mode, but most shots till now what we have seen is your choice of vertical mode. And so any particular reason for that? And do you, since you've not yet shown any image where you've used ND filters and all, do you still shoot using tripod? So probably one part you've already answered.
Yeah. I always shoot with tripods. I like to have that possibility to blend in the different exposures on, especially when it comes to moving water. And I think that it was kind of Instagram that forced me to think vertical when I was out there.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's messed me up, but so that's I think that's kind of call it the bad habit in a backbone. I just go vertical first thing. So I have to actually think a bit different and try to restrain myself and also do some horizontal shots. But of course, it depends on the scene. I think that this is just made for a vertical, and the next image is a typical horizontal, and it's one of the few images that I have that doesn't include the sky. I think that's nice actually. So it feels a bit more free to be sky independent, you know, that you have to wait for the sunset, and if it doesn't get any clouds and so on, it's kind of a failure. But I have this really beautiful light coming in from the left, and light up the scene, just touched it, and I think that was really nice. So I have no need to add a sky to this one, because this is all about the rocky surface here.
This
So
is one
Excuse me?
beautiful composition. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really like that one. I like that it was to kind of frame the shots with using the smooth shaped rocks in the foreground. You kind of frame it all the way around like a circle.
Yeah.
And this is called the potholes in Nissedal, and this is since the ice age, rocks and gravel have been swirling around. This is a dried out riverbed, so they are creating these smooth shapes and big potholes. So there's a dam further up here, so there's not much water now, but it's really great. Also this sculptural feel and look to all these very nicely shaped rocks. So I used the 10-stop ND filter to smooth out the water, because I wanted the rocks and the shape of the rocks to stand out.
I think I've seen this image in your NiSi art book, volume 1.
Yeah, that's right. They picked that one, so that's a typical shot where the 10-stop MD is a must. Yeah, because the water looked very messy without the 10-stop filter. So I used I think it was 1 minute exposure or something for the water. Yeah. And then I used another shot with shorter shutter speed to freeze the foliage on the trees, so that it doesn't move during the 1 minute's exposure and get soft. So I basically just try to keep the shadows pretty dark, but keep the details. And I wanted to enhance the light that it kind of flowed in to the image from the background here, and just kiss this kind of stones down here. So the light was actually moving a bit during the 1 minute. So I really like the softness that the light here shows. So I think that I remember that actually talked with Carl Lovewall that you had on here earlier, Carl, about this shot, because he's really good in keeping the shadows cool and the highlights warm. So on this one I used Luminosity Mask to target the shadows. I cooled those down with color balance in Photoshop, and I used Bright Luminosity Mask to target the highlights, and I warmed those up. And then you get a really good separation between the cooler shadows and the warmer highlights, because the cooler tones resides and the warm lights bring things forward. So you get that push and pull through the image, and that looks really, really good, and you can do it in a very controlled way when you use it through luminosity masking.
Right.
Yeah. I can show you. This is a blue hour shot from Vøringsfossen, the waterfall I showed you a bit earlier.
Wow.
And this time, yeah, thank you. This time it wasn't so much water in the river, so I was able to go all the way down to the river. And I really like this kind of layers of stone that you have down here. And this is also a good way to use elements in a composition to create depth. Is that you use kind of repeating shapes, but it's big and large close to you, and then it gets smaller and smaller when you move into your frame. So it kind of naturally leads the eye in to the waterfall. So this is a really beautiful place. I think I must go to that. I would really love to visit that place in autumn or something to get these autumn colors. I think that Ole Henrik Kjellstad have some great shots from here during autumn. Yes, and I have not been shooting so much during the winter. We had really bad winter here last year. It was not many days with actually snow, so it was not so much opportunities. But this is a place in Kongsberg. It's I think this is about 2 hours drive from my place. We're on the top of a mountain here, and it was have been very cold, and the cold and the wind has made for these beautiful curvy lines. I think it's called Strug lines that I used as a foreground elements. I really like these curve lines, kind of S curves that leads the eye in. So I blended it later shot with the stars and so on into this twilight image. So I would really love to photograph in winter more. I like the pureness of the snow and so on.
How about the moon, Hans?
Yeah, that is a separate. I always shoot separate exposures for the moon. If I were to shoot this and just exposure for the scene, the moon just would be a white blob, blown up blob.
Right.
So I used the long lens to zoom in on that, and I do a proper exposure on that one. And then you will usually get the moon correctly exposed, and the surrounding area of the background will be black. And then it's easy to blend that in Photoshop, just using blending mode screen or lighten. So you have to do that in separate exposures to get it right. Yeah. I did use some soft touching around a few of the stars to make them a bit more dreamy and a bit more standout.
Yeah.
Just to get a little bit more that's going on in the sky.
Right.
So if I have the chance to go for a dreamy version, I will most of the time just do it. I like that.
The light was from the left was there, or
Yeah. Yes, it was the sun was setting down here, so it's kind of a late blue hour shot, and you had the twilight coming in here, and I enhanced that in post using light bleed techniques, as I mentioned earlier, using soft brush with color in a small size. Click one time, do it again with a bigger brush, click it again, bigger brush, bigger brush, bigger brush. Yeah. So the light will be more saturated and stronger, closest to the light source, then naturally fade out into the scene like natural light. And then you can use the opacity on the layer to just tune it, just how strong you want it to appear on.
I think I will ask here because I think it is relevant probably here itself. So I've received an email from Martin Eriksson.
Yeah.
Let me read the email itself because that will give some idea. So he's addressing it to me saying that first I must compliment you all on a very nice YouTube series with great photographers attending. So thank you, Martin. It's always a privilege. And reference our communication. So he asked me how to send the images. So I sent him the email. Now, first I must say that Mr. Asklaksen is a great inspiration and his eye for composition is world class. He also has outstanding color work in his images. So I have two questions for him. Number one is, in a lot of your images, we see this beautiful soft pink color in the clouds. Would you care to share some post-processing tips on how to achieve this? So I think second question I'll ask slightly later. So probably first question.
Yeah, I can do that. I can see if I can show you some images with, yeah, maybe that one.
Yeah.
Talk about this warm light and the soft dream light that I had in my images, especially maybe in the early ones. I have used kind of a few techniques to get that look on the images. I have been fine-tuning a bit over the years, but when I started out, I used double raw processing. I used smart objects so they get instant access to the raw data in the image. So I got one layer with a normal white balance, then I duplicate it, and I open that one in Camera Raw, and then I use the split toning in Camera Raw and warm up the highlights there, and you can tint that one with color as well. So then yes, I just mainly went for the warm version with that one and warm up the highlights to my liking, and then I masked that in through Luminosity Mask in Photoshop. I think I preferably did it with the red channel. That's a good representation of the warm light in your image, so that it goes to the right spots and not the overall image. I think I was kind of overdoing that in the beginning and then got a slight magenta cast through the whole image, but that was the way I did it in my earliest days. There's also another great technique that you can use to make the highlights pop more and make a more warm feel to it. I don't know if anyone of you uses NiSi collection.
Yeah.
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 NiSi collection have a filter called the sky filter.
Yeah.
And that one really brings out the red in the image and makes the sky pops a bit, and brings out the red and pinkish tones. So I often sometimes use that one to a bit late in the processing to make the sky pop more and make the light more warm and pleasing. And then I use a luminosity mask on that layer, Bytes 1 or 2, so I can apply it just where I want to. So I can apply it just to the highlights, because I don't want to get any of that warm color in the shadow areas. So that's a good way to control it. Nowadays, I usually go with a color balance tool in Photoshop.
Okay.
I go for, I use Luminosity Mask to target the shadows, darks free or something. And then I use the color balance tool to cool down the shadows. And then I make another layer with the color balance where I use, it's mostly Bytes 1. That's target all the highlights. And I use the color balance tool to get some warmth into the highlights. And then you get a good separation between the cooler tones and the warmer tones in your images. You have full control of it using the color balance tool. And through luminosity masks that get very precise. So I think that's the preferred method to do it. So I don't think I have such a strong magenta cast in my images anymore. But that's the way I would do it now.
Thank you. And that's I think quite an elaborate answer.
Yeah.
So Hans, just for the benefit of our viewers, which panel do you use for luminosity mask, or do you make them yourselves manually?
No, I use the Raya Pro panel from Jimmy McIntyre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I started out with that one, so I just stick to that one. Actually, I use mostly just this Instamask panel.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are great. So I usually just choose the Bytes one here if I want to target the highlights, and I try to just adjust it with the levels or something if I want to bring it out more, or if I want to. For instance, here you can see, if you see carefully, you see that the light on the center mountain is a bit more saturated than the lights on this mountain. Because I want the eye to draw into the center of the image. I don't want the eye to go here into the edge. So this is more saturated than this one. So that's the way you can, when you target your adjustments, you can kind of fine tune it and pick out the spots where you want the eye to go. That's a nice way to be precise and to kind of control the lights in your scene.
Great. That was good advice.
Yeah.
Hans, any reason you prefer Raya Pro over TK panel?
I haven't actually tried the TK panel, actually. I just stick with Raya Pro because it was very easy to use, and I'm not an advanced Luminosity Mask user, so it just fulfill all my needs. But I've seen that a lot of photographers use the TK action panel, so I don't know if I will try to test that out. But you kind of get comfortable with one kind of workflow, so maybe there's no reason to complicate things even more.
In the end, they all do the same job. But,
but
you just get used to one panel and you stick to it. Why learn something new when you know one panel pretty well?
Yeah, and will it make my images better? I'm not so sure. I think it's, as you say, it's probably do the same job.
I think my feeling is the TK panel is a little faster because it prepares. It has a function that helps you to. It doesn't make the masks every time. It has a base mask and then just processes from that. So I just feel the TK panel is a little faster than the others, and the file sizes are smaller with TK because of the same reason.
Yeah, good point. How about you, Tor? Do you use TK panel?
I started off with Raya Pro like you, and then I've shifted to TK recently.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And the reason for shifting was just the speed. The TK7 panel is much faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like you, Hans. Though I use the TK action panel, I've used it since version number 4, and I just stick with it. It can be a bit complex, so since it's the same functions basically following through every new version, adding some new versions, I kind of stick with it to get comfortable with using it. But I just use the luminosity and masking, and sometimes also saturation masks.
Yeah, recently Andrea Celli was on our show and he introduced us to TM panel. And the TM panel has one advantage over the others, is that it allows you to make tonality masks. So you can make masks depending on the tonality of the images. So that was quite a unique feature, I thought. So we're trying to teach ourselves how to use that.
Yeah. There are great tools, I think, to use. And I use them mostly with my dodge and burning. I use that almost all the time through luminosity masks. Then you can be a bit sloppy with the dodging actually, because the luminosity masks are so precise, and it looks very natural as well. So it's great tools. Yeah, I can move on.
Yes.
Yeah, and then it was Lofoten Island for me, and this is I would say it was maybe my first meeting with epic locations. This was something totally different than what my local spots were like, and I must say that Lofoten Islands is just an amazing place, and you get all these fantastic locations, you know, so close to each other, and so many opportunities out there. So so it's a place you can visit every year actually, and I think that yeah, that place really blew my mind, and I want to visit that again at one point.
I agree with you. This place is, this has some magic in it.
Yeah, it does. So I would actually, what I haven't been able to experience in Lofoten is the Northern Lights. So so that's on my list to be in Lofoten, capture the Northern Lights. Tor Ivar, you know, is the king of Northern Lights. He has a lot of them and famous for those shots. So I hope that he will probably show us some of those later.
Waiting for those.
Yeah. I guess that you all know this place, Hamnøy in Lofoten.
Yeah.
Very interesting perspective, not the usual by the road perspective.
You're under the bridge. Hans, you're under the bridge.
The bridge was full of photographers, and I was the only one under the bridge. So that was the right place to be, I think.
And
So
it's a different angle. So it's a different angle. It's giving it a different perspective from what usually we have seen. So
yeah, sometimes you don't have to be too creative, and just, you know, just move a little bit out of the typical location. You can get something quite different. So so I really like the perspective from down here. And this was it was a morning when it was raining, and then suddenly the rain stopped and the light pierced through. So this is in a transition from rain to sun. I really like those moments when it's so much haze and atmosphere in the air. There's a lot of moisture in the air back here.
okay.
And I was talking about the composition. I was very careful that I wanted to get a good separation between these rocks here, of the water between those all the way. And again, it's kind of repeating shapes, you know.
Yeah.
So this is big, smaller, and even smaller. And you can also see that these rocks have warmer tones than the ones in the foreground.
Yeah.
That's the way I used to cool down the foreground and warm up the interesting part of the image where we want the eye to go.
And do we see two different shutter speeds here, Hans? The water in the foreground seems very smooth, while the water further back is a little choppy.
Yeah, I think.
Is that deliberate?
I think you're right. I think you're right with that one. I think this is several shots actually trying to blend in the right water movement. The waves were kind of tricky at this day. They weren't actually quite, you know, acting like I want them to, because I want them to create lines that leads you through the image into the cabins. So I had to be patient and try a lot of different shutter speeds, and then I carefully blended those that aim for the same goal, creating lines that draws you in and leads the eye in. I also use waves and motion to hide things. I think there was a rock here that I didn't like, so I used one exposure that the water was over it. So you can simplify your scenes, water scenes, with using exposures with water that actually covers things as well. So I think that I'm a strong believer in that less is more in landscape photography. So if you have the opportunity to simplify the scene, then just go for it.
And one more question, Hans. I see that you have an electrical pole, or is it a telephone pole here?
Yeah.
You are you one of those who don't clone out subjects? You have some principles in place there which are working.
No. I think that I actually should have cloned out those power
Okay.
lines. I don't think
No.
that they have the image.
It was
But,
just a question. Just a question
yeah.
on what do you normally do?
Yeah, I normally take out things that I don't think add to the image. I have other shots from this place where I have cloned out the power lines, so I probably should have done that. So I guess I have some homework to do later.
Sorry to increase your homework.
No. Just thank you for pointing it out. No problem. So this is also one. This is an exposure blend for the window. This was reflecting the sky, so it was totally blown out. So I was a bit unsure because the whole image looked like it got all the dynamic range in place. But I was a bit unsure, so I took an exposure blend on the scene just to be sure. And I think that's a good thing to do when you are a bit unsure, because it's really not a good feeling to come home and this is just a white blob, you know. So it's always good to have all the files you need to control the light. So I really like this this spot down there.
Very nice, beautiful image.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow.
Oh, this is Skagsand Beach, and Lofoten is a place that can look good in all kinds of light, actually. So this was it was raining all day, and the suddenly just stopped to rain a bit, and we headed out to Skagsand and tried to make something out of it, and just playing with the dark and gloomy mood that was there. So this was the day after it had been a storm in Lofoten. So it was a lot of seaweeds and so on that was all around. So it was a big job trying to clean up the image, to clone those things out. So composition-wise, I noticed that this chain of rocks kind of mimics the shape of the mountain.
Mm.
And I really like to play with those kind of elements. It's something that you may not notice at first, but I think that it adds to the image, and we can add those kind of repeating shapes in your image. Yes, and of course, Skagsand is just great for wide angle and foregrounds, you know, with all these shapes in the sand. So I went really close to these long lines, the curved lines, sand, and carefully try to dodge a bit on the highlights of it. But the light was kind of gray, so I added a lot of contrast to the sky and tried just to carefully lift the highlights a tad. Yeah, and this is actually one of my famous or favorite places in Lofoten. This is Untitled Beach, and it's the famous Dragon Eye. Or what is it that Ryan Dyer calls it, Toriva? Is it the avocado?
Yeah, I think he calls it the avocado. I can't remember, but commonly it's known as the Dragon Eye of Utaklev.
Yeah, is this one. So here I was with Morten that sent in the question, and Roger, and this was a storm coming in here, and I was really lucky to get this shot. It was just seconds later, after I have done bracketing for the sky and the focus stack, it started to pour with rain, and the wind came blowing in. So this was all just ripples, you know, in the surface here. So I was really lucky with the timing there, and I got to capture it in kind of in between when the light started to be drowned by the big storm clouds. So meant for a quite dramatic image. So yeah, I really like Utaklev. It's got a lot of compositional opportunities, and And this epic mountain back here is just a wonderful spot. Yeah, I can mention something that I try to do in my images as well, and when it comes to post processing, is that this mountain is in the background, and things that are further back in the image, they have it's more haze between the foreground and the background. So the blacks get more kind of washed out, more of a hazy look. I like to enhance that in post. So the image actually looked a bit darker. I like to create more haze in the background to get a stronger separation from that one and to the foreground. If I had the same level of blacks in the foreground and in the background, you wouldn't get that sense of depth in the image. So that's the one thing I always try to do.
Mm.
Have you guys been to Lofoten?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
We're not so lucky with this dragon eye or something. Yeah, there was too many people this time, so
Yeah.
I think we
everybody-
got really bad weather.
both.
It was
And,
raining. It was gray. There was no definition in the sky. Really bad.
Yeah, that's typical Lofoten. So that's gonna be a bit frustrating, but okay, we can move on. This is another shot from Lofoten.
Beautiful.
And I really like I think that it's maybe the composition that kind of makes the image here. It was very gray and dark and gloomy. It's not much light at that day, but I think that the central composition works great here, and I was very careful with how I placed my camera because I wanted the reflection to show. And I wanted the peak of the mountains to show in the reflection and to make a strong line, a centered line from the peaks and down to the reflecting shape in the foreground. Yeah, I just visualized it a bit that I really like, as I said before, to work with the triangles in my composition. They are great for pointing direction and also great for creating 3D objects. So you got this triangular shape of the mountain, and it's reflected down here in the water. And the foreground stone, the foreground elements also have that triangular shape and connects it to the shape of the mountain. So that makes the composition very simple, but yet very strong as well.
very strong, actually, very strong. But yeah, very soothing, very simple, beautiful visual flow.
Yeah, thank you. So again, I just didn't do much in post-processing in this one. Actually, I tried to burn this mountain a bit, darken it a bit, so it wouldn't get so much attention as this scented mountain that I wanted the eye to go to. Work with the highlights here, and I created used the Luminosity Mask to target the darks back here and washed it a bit out, so it creates depth and doesn't kind of grow together with the blacks in this side. So it's always about separating your objects. That's a good thing. And I got one more from Lofoten. I guess we had a little sneak peek on this one at the Kai's session.
Yeah.
Yes, we saw it.
This is from the rugged coast of Vøringsfossen. That's famous for their unpredictable waves. So it's a central composition as well, and I really like that the foreground rocks kind of frame the shots. And you got these long rocks here that kind of makes us pointers into the mountain. And you got this beautiful swirl that I was aiming for. So this part of the image was the one that grabbed my attention that made me go for this one. So I used longer exposure to get the swirl right, and a shorter exposure on the wave that came in from the right and flowing into the scene. And I think the whole thing was shot with the F11 or something. And I dodged a bit on the light from the side just to enhance that a bit. But was very careful that I wanted this part, the central part of the mountain, to be a bit more bright, a bit more saturated than the rest of the scene back there, so that the eye go straight from the foreground and into this mountain peaks. There's a lot of, yeah.
No, Hans, I think Kai had asked you to crop off the sky a little bit, which you didn't, and I like the fact that you didn't, because otherwise it would have looked a little boxed. This gives us space.
Yeah, it gives a bit space beyond the mountains and gives them a bit, breathing room.
Yeah.
I think that.
In fact, I would like a little more room on the bottom as well. I think both ways. I like the room at the top, but a little room at the bottom also would be nice.
Yeah, down here, yeah. I think that this is this was panorama. I think I took this part in the horizontal, and then I tilted my camera upwards and took the mountain.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah, but
very nice shot.
I can agree with you that it wouldn't hurt to have a bit more rocks in the foreground. Things can get.
But I think the room on the top is just right. It's perfect.
Yeah, I think that Kai meant that the sky was in danger of taking too much attention from the swirl in the foreground. That kind of made the shot. This is the most important element.
Hans, I have the same shot. I have the same shot from my trip to Senya, and cool. I can promise you that I would have given my right arm to get a sky like that.
Yeah,
I had a very bad sky.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was on the trip with Kai. It was full storm for days in Lofoten. It was just terrible weather. So we actually got one day with decent light, and I find it very hard to crop that out later. So I just.
I think it looks great.
Great. Thank you. So that is kind of the ones I want you to show you from Lofoten. And now I just try to try new stuff, and I have tried to dive into the intimate landscape shots, the smaller scenes.
That will be good. You have some stuff.
I think it's really refreshing to try something new now and then, so you're not just repeating yourself. So I've tried to work with smaller scenes, but it's a difficult genre, I think. But I did this one.
I saw this, and I was really hooked on to this. I have one immediate question coming up here now.
Yeah.
How easy or difficult it is to shift from wide perspectives, that wide, grand landscapes, to macroscapes, kind of intimate landscapes. How easy it is or difficult it is, and do you continue doing it in between, shifting from wide to intimate, or you specifically go for intimate landscape photography, or and do that?
Yeah.
What is your take?
Well, I found it very difficult, actually. No, it's so easy, just to do the things that you know how to do, and it's kind of a bit lazy as well, to go with a safe choice. But on that trip, I actually I have the long lens on the camera. I was kind of dedicated to look for smaller scenes, as you say. I wanted to test that out, to try that out. And I think it's, you have to change your mind a bit when you start to look for the smaller scenes. I felt kind of lost out there. What am I actually looking for? So when I saw this scene, I noticed that it was the complementary colors that kind of spoke to me. The orangey brown of the dead leaves against the blue flowers. That was the first thing that caught my attention, and I really like that this make this kind of smile and this semicircle, and then you got they got this typical concept going for with the dead leaves and the blooming flowers that represents new life. And for this one, this was actually shot in the middle of the day, in bright sunshine. So I was blocking the sun with my body and just shot in an angle down. I think I actually focus stacked this one for the leaves down in the foreground. So I just blocked out the sun, and the light you see is just reflecting lights from the surroundings. So I'm actually surprised that it works so well, actually, to be a midday shot. So I darkened the image quite a lot, and I mostly just work with mid-tone contrast and just tuning the colors, make those complementary, and cool down the leaves a bit. So in these kind of scenes, mid-tone contrast can do wonders, actually. So because it was in shadows, the light was kind of flat, but if you add a lot of contrast in it, it will bring it back to life. So I think I will probably do more of these smaller scenes and try to broaden my portfolio a bit, so it don't look so repetitive.
What I really appreciate, Hans, which makes your shots very distinctive, is I think you keep the temperature, the overall white balance, a little bit augmented towards cold, like cooler shades, right? And that's something that's even very saturated, warm-looking sunsets look very appealing because it gives you a feeling of calmness and stillness because of the temperature, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's kind of hard to get the white balance right, actually. So I think it's I try to go with a slightly cooler white balance now from the raw stage. I think it's easier to warm that up if you are think that it's too cold. I think it's a little bit hard if you have a too warm white balance to begin with and try to fix that in Photoshop. I think you kind of creating problems for yourself. So I think I try to work with a cooler balance to start with, and then I try to separate the tones more with the Luminosity Mask and not globally. So it's Luminosity Mask is great for picking up the highlights and just work with those.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. So that was actually I'm through my presentation now.
Great shots, Hans.
Thank you.
There is one more intimate landscape shot. I was looking at your Instagram. I think sand on that lighted up sand. Let me just check. What was that? What is the name of that? Larvik. You've taken it in Larvik. Gold Rush.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I don't think I have that on my computer right now, but I know the ones you mean. That is just it was really low tide on the beach, so the sand was revealed, and it's just patterns in the sand. And I was there before sunrise. As the sun rose, the sun hits the top of the patterns. So I worked just with color contrast and mid-tone contrast on that shot. So if you darken the shot and bring up the highlights, it really brings those images to life. And that was all about the color separation with the cool shadows and warm highlights. I think that sand has a good way of kind of reflect the colors around it, because the sky was blue. So I think they picked up that one, and the sun was hitting those tiny peaks of the patterns. So it had to work with that contrast.
Okay, but that's another wonderful kind of macroscape kind of a thing. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, anybody has any question, guys?
I'm just waiting to see now Tor's work. He has been sitting quietly with us for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do not have such a nice presentation as Hans did. I have selected a handful of images and just placed them in a Lightroom catalog. I'll show you full screen and kind of talk you through my process over the years capturing.
North Norway, right? You're based out of North Norway.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can.
Lofoten.
No, I am from Nordreisa, which is about 8 hours driving northeast of Lofoten. So it's way up north in Norway. And I've been shooting for about 8 or so years now. I got into photography because at the time I was playing this video game, World of Warcraft, at a world competing level. It consumed all my waking hours apart from work. And I figured out that I needed a new hobby to get me away from the online gaming addiction. Yeah. So I also think that I brought with me some of the enthusiasm for learning things into photography. So at the time, I bought a camera which at that time was so expensive I couldn't afford not to learn how to use it, just to kind of pull me away from gaming. So that's basically how I began my photography journey about 8-9 years ago or so. I have.
How did you guys meet, you and Hans?
One more time.
How did you guys meet, you and Hans?
Oh, me and Hans, we have actually never met physically. We were part of this infamous Instagram pod, which we made, must have been something like 4 years ago or so, where, as Hans said, we also have Mats Petter Iversen, Kai Hornung, and also Mikkel Beiter, and also Sapna Reddy as a part of the core of that group. So we've basically been chatting and getting to know each other that way. So me and Hans talked a bit yesterday. Over the years of chatting with each other, you kind of feel that you know the person without actually meeting. So it was kind of easy to talk to these guys when you actually met them. I've been a photography guide as well. I've been guiding in the Lofoten Islands, Iceland, and Faroe Islands. And through there, I've met Mikkel Beiter, Mats Petter Iversen, and also Mikkel ran a workshop in Lofoten with Ted Gore.
Oh, that must have been cool, running it with Ted.
Yeah, he is quite exceptional.
Yeah. I think the audience wants to see some nice Norwegian landscapes. Right?
Yeah, we are ready for some Northern Lights here, Tor.
Yeah, I'll share my screen with you guys if I am allowed.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find the right button here. No, I don't think so.
What? You can share.
I can share it. I've only used Zoom a few times. Video settings, no. Record. Sorry about this. What if I right click? No.
So whatever you want to share, first you have to open that, double click and open it before you press the share button.
Yeah, I tried this yesterday with Hans, but then I had like the share screen button, but it's not showing today.
Share
For
screen
some
there at the bottom.
sorry about that. I saw the button now. It was green and centralized. I should have seen it a long time ago. So
Yes, we see it now too.
Yeah.
I will see if I can make this full screen. This is, of course, the Northern Lights. It's what has driven me further into photography when I started first out. I live in Northern Norway. I live with the Northern Lights every clear night during the winter, more or less. This is a capture from 2012 when I first started out. And the mountain range here is quite famous among skiers because this is one of the few places in the world where you can go from summit to sea on skis. I've never done that, and I really doubt I ever will. I'm not a good skier. But so I started out with diving deeper and deeper into Northern Lights photography. This is shot in 2012, as I said. My photography skills were quite limited. Compositionally, I shot whatever felt good to the eye at the time. For some mysterious reason, I'm of course very thankful. This is my most sold image throughout the years. I sell this image on a large print more or less once or twice a month now. So I will show you a few images from the very beginning before I started to develop a sense of composition and the technical part when it comes to post-processing and color theory and things like that. So from 2015, there was this geomagnetic storm. This is something when you're in an area or region of the world, like within the Arctic Circle or a bit below it, depending on the strength of the Northern Lights, you always want to have a geomagnetic storm. This means that the sun produces a flare that is thrown out in outer space, hitting Earth's atmosphere, creating Northern Lights. And with what's so special about the geomagnetic storms is that you will get a more powerful aurora, or well, Northern Lights, and you will be able to see with your naked eyes different colors. Like in this one, I have purple, green, and a bit of yellow here. You will also be able to see red, blue, and
purple,
more pinkish kind of tones, depending on the length of the Northern Lights beams themselves and how far up it is in the atmosphere. So this is both scenes from now I've shown you so far are from my hometown region, about 25 minutes of driving away. So they're quite accessible, which is super nice when out chasing the Northern Lights. well, basically because you're interested in finding a good place with a clear sky. That is oftentimes in northern Norway a problem. We are not blessed with too many nights of clear skies, which I know from experience guiding photo tourists can be a bit annoying because many come up here to witness the northern lights, of course. But it is what it is. As a guide, I can't control the weather, unfortunately. This is a shot from the same place, same night, geomagnetic storm. I was fortunate enough this time to borrow the Nikon D810A, so the astrophotography full frame camera from Nikon. So this image is actually shot at 12,800 ISO.
Wow.
And if I zoom in here, I'm not sure if this shows up very well in the video, but
there's no noise.
No, very little noise. Of course, it's been post-processed and I've reduced noise, but it was very easy with this astrophotography camera. I considered purchasing it for Northern Lights photography, but it's a hefty price for a so specialized camera. Even though I shoot a lot of Northern Lights, there are cameras that do just not as well, probably. Well, now there are cameras that are better, but at the time I had a D810 as well, not astrophotography, and it was like one stop or so worse when it comes to ISO handling. So getting a new camera just for this was not a priority or even necessary. So this shot also ignited my interest in Northern Lights photography. This was nominated for Astronomy Photographer of the Year back in 2015, or sorry, 16. Unfortunately, I did not win, but it was fun to get recognition by such a niche competition.
No, your colors are absolutely amazing. The color tones.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a problem here because the Northern Lights were so powerful that the highlight region here was somewhat hard to control. And at that time as well, I've just started to dive deeper into post-processing and also shooting. When you're shooting Northern Lights, you basically do not want to blow your highlights because they're not recoverable as well highlights during sunset and sunrise and any time of the day, really. And also when it is the same principle, you will get more details in your Northern Lights as long as you can preserve your highlights.
It's a good point. And do you exposure bracket?
Not for this shot, I did not. My photography skills, I've just got into bracketing, but since the Northern Lights were so extreme, my mind was more or less, the fuses in my mind were more or less blown because it happens once a year maybe, and you will have to have a clear night sky to be able to witness this. So
what was the KPI right now? What was the KPI here?
Probably around 8 or 9.
Oh man, that's something.
A day after, I read in the news that you could see these Northern Lights. Well, probably not as powerful as this, down all the way down to Germany.
Oh.
So that can happen. I don't know. Do you guys want me to talk about the KP values for your viewers and what?
Yeah, that would be interesting. That would be interesting. And also, what kind of shutter speeds do you keep to capture something like this? That would be interesting.
Yeah. So 10 seconds for this one. I probably, It's a balancing act because I wanted to capture the Milky Way as well for this shot. And normally up here in northern Norway, the Milky Way is so dim, and we do not ever see the core. We only have like a thin tail or whatever you want to call it of the Milky Way up here. So 10 seconds became the sweet spot to be able to pull out detail from the Milky Way and not to blow out too much of the highlights in the northern lights. So for getting back to the KP values, it's more or less a geographical thing, I'm sorry. So a KP 0 and 1, you will be able to see that up in northern Norway, northern, I think maybe Finland, and also Siberia. And as the increments go, KP2, you will be able to see a bit further south. So you'll get that above your head, I think, in the Lofoten Islands. KP3, you will have a bit further south, and so on and so forth. So a KP9, you'll be able to see in the northern parts of Germany, given that you do not have light pollution. Also, when it comes, the stronger the KP value, the stronger the northern lights, of course, are. And when you get to those strong geomagnetic storms, they will also be, they have the possibility to destroy satellite and radio equipment, which sometimes can be problematic for drones and also, of course, for surveillance kind of purposes, and also radio. You hear a lot about that in the US because there's, of course, many radio channels, many satellites controlled there, etc. We do not have that problem in northern Norway or in Norway in general. I use a site called Space Weather Live to keep an eye out for these spikes in KP value and also geomagnetic storms. So whenever there's an announcement, okay, the sun has released a sun flare expecting to hit Earth's atmosphere in about 3 days, then I know that in possibly 2 days, the first wave will come, because it's not an exact science yet. The sun flare will increase and decrease in speeds, but they fly out from the sun in about 800 or so kilometers per second. So it's quite fast. So I usually tend to go out the day before it's announced, just in case. It happens half the time, I find. The Northern Lights season in itself, if you're a tourist, I would recommend mid-September throughout March in Northern Norway. But you will be able to see the Northern Lights as early as August, if you are lucky.
Wow.
Many people have asked me if this is a composite. All the images I'll show you today, there are no composite images. They are one shot or, well, several shots if they're focus stacked. This is from August 30th. And the reason it looks like daytime is because on the left-hand side here, I have the full moon shining in the Lyngen Fjord. Back in the background here, it's the Lyngen Alps, as I showed you in my first image. And well, I find the image in itself, it's not super composed, but it's a bit special to me, since I actually was able to capture the Northern Lights as early as August. It's still summer, and you will have maybe half an hour or so before on half an hour where it's dark enough to be able to capture this.
This is
normal.
God, this is once in a lifetime shot. This one.
Yeah, you would have to be very lucky, and if I didn't have a full moon, I would lose, of course, all the light I have here on these little grass heads or grass humps, and it would look very different. As you can see in the clouds here, they actually catch some of the light from the full moon on the left-hand side of the frame. So it's a quite special shot to me. It's not my best, but it's like more of a memory, a good memory.
Tor, can I ask you a question to Tor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in that shot, Tor, how is it with the full moon? Can that be so strong that it can actually kill the northern lights, that you're not able to see them as clearly?
Yeah, when it comes to the full moon, and the full moon often can become a problem for capturing the northern lights if you're shooting towards the full moon. In such a case, you might benefit from bracketing, but still, the light of the full moon, we don't have anything. Well, you have the sun, which is brighter as an element in the sky. There's nothing brighter, and well, the moon is a reflection of the sun's light, so it is up there in brightness level.
Tor, just curious, what was the shutter speed like on this shot?
Okay, I'll show you. I couldn't show you in full screen. 30 seconds f11 ISO 800.
Wow, that is bright as day.
Yeah, and the reason I did that, the only reason I was able to do this is because of the full moon. So a very, very low ISO value in regards of the northern lights. And
but Tor,
also,
is such a long shutter speed counterproductive for northern lights, because you don't get the fan for the, you know, the I don't know what to call them. We try and capture the fan of the northern light, you know,
yeah, exactly.
But my experience is that if you go for too long a shutter speed, then the fan blurs and you don't have definition in your northern light. Do you also aim for that?
This shot, just to get this shot out of the way, is well, one of a kind when it comes to settings. Normally you will get a very dark scene using the settings I've just used because of the high f-stop number. But you're right, normally you would want a shutter speed between 4 and maybe 10 seconds.
Yeah, 4 and 10. Yeah.
To capture detail in the northern lights. Also, when it comes to ISO values, you actually do not want your ISO as low as it can go, because the higher ISO value you use, there's a line going here between color and detail. So ideally, I find ISO 1600 captures both color and detail well, because you will get a boost in the luminosity value from using a higher ISO. You can, of course, normally regulate the luminosity value by shutter speed, and well, normally you would have an f2.8. That is normal, because you will want the faster shutter speed. When you increase your ISO, say 6400, at that point, if there are just dim colors, let's say dim pink colors in the northern lights, those will be washed out by the high ISO number because they will become so brighter because of the fact that you have a higher ISO. So it's a balancing act because sometimes you need a super fast shutter speed and you will have to kind of weigh your benefits for and against. Because if the northern lights are moving super fast, you have the curtains, which you were referring to.
Yeah.
You would want a shutter speed, maybe even at some nights, down to half a second. And then you will lose some of the color, but you will capture the details in those curtains, which are spectacular. If you use a lower ISO, longer shutter speed, when the northern lights are moving as fast as I just described, you will lose a lot of detail. You will have something like I'm showing you in this image here. Very little detail in the upper scene here in the curtains. You can see they're maybe not even visible on the video.
Yeah.
And an example of these curtains.
Oops.
This is called an Aurora Corona. In these times, a bit overused word, but
What's your next?
this is one more time.
No, just I was joking. I was just joking.
Yeah.
So this is a Corona, Northern Lights Corona, and you will get these when pointing your camera straight up into the Northern Lights when they are moving fast. You will see, if you look, this is also a super good tip when you're shooting the Northern Lights. Do pay attention to your surroundings because the Northern Lights might actually be even better behind you or above you. So it's easy to get fixated on a composition you're working on, but the whole show can actually go on behind you. So you need to be very adaptive when shooting the Northern Lights. As I mentioned, these lights, they come from the sun at a speed of around, the good Northern Lights come at a speed of around 750, 800 or around those kilometers per second. So they move very, very fast. And this is a shot I did straight upwards into the Northern Lights when they were dancing above my head. And you will get, it's like the abstract version of the Northern Lights. So as you can see here in my settings, 4 seconds, 2.8 ISO 1600 at 24 millimeters. Normally, I would never use a 24 to 70 millimeter lens when capturing the Northern Lights. But what I was doing this particular night was capturing a panorama. So I needed to zoom a bit in to get the scene in the image here. This is also from the early days of my photography. As you can see, this image basically only has something on my on the left-hand side of the image, nothing going on the right, unfortunately. But it was an experiment for me trying to capture the Northern Lights as a panorama. It's actually a difficult process unless you are experienced with capturing panoramas, because these lights here are moving. So you need to shoot, move your camera, shoot. You do not have time to wait, because if you wait too much, either the Northern Lights here can be gone, or, well, they move too much and you will have problems stitching in post. So those were images from the old days. I'll show you this one as well. It's also from my old days because my compositions were a lot hit and miss. Here I've nicely placed this lavo, which is a traditional Sami people tent, and they use it for, well, it's very big, so you can have a stove inside and actually live there for a few days in winter time. I nicely placed, of course, this lavo in the lower third in the rule of thirds, which was a big thing when I started learning composition. It works well this time because you will have the northern lights beaming out here on the right-hand side, so there's interest, well, more or less in the entire image. This image also went viral back in the day when I was active on Facebook. At least I was not on Instagram at that time. I thought Instagram was just for showing what you ate for dinner, but then again, so are all many social media platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah, another image with the Milky Way and the Northern Lights. I'll show you my take on this scene a few years later when I had learned compositional rules, visual flow, and also post-processing. So I went from here, the Northern Lights here, spectacular, Milky Way, it's all good. I just wish I had better understanding of what I was doing at the time. This is a scene from that same cottage. It's a wreck, really. There's no one ever living here because the walls are torn from bad weather and it's never been maintained. So here, this is also something you learn as you process with daytime photography as well. It's spotting those foregrounds, seeing how they can work for you, which is very relevant to the Northern Lights, because a wave of Northern Lights like this one can easily move out of frame before you find the foreground. So you need to scout the scene, preferably in the afternoon before it gets too dark. Or you can use your headlamp as you go and just wing it, which is something I do most of the time, really, because I head out when I know there's Northern Lights, and I have a few locations that I pick and choose from. But you will also need to be very adaptive in relation to the cloud cover. And this is such a place. It's up on a mountain pass where you will have also a weather. The weather can either stop here or be completely different. It's one of those local things you need to pay attention to for many kinds of photography. So, any questions so far?
I think we are just enjoying your Northern Lights beauty.
Yeah, I'll continue, and we can do a bit of questions later. I'll save a few of these images. Just this is just another one where I was by the Lyngen Alps again, and in a situation like this, where you have such a strong rain of Northern Lights going on your only one part of the scene, it becomes more documentary compared to a compositional process, because you have a nice pond here in front here of the fjord. But if I move a bit further to the right here, I don't have a good composition going on anyway. So that is also why I wanted to show you guys this image, that the northern lights are so random that sometimes you will have a difficult time composing for them.
Yeah,
because you can.
Yeah, fully agree with you there. What is the shutter speed here? Exposure time?
Let me check. I didn't have. If I remember correctly, I think I was at 10 seconds ISO 3200.
Okay.
f2.8.
Okay, so you usually keep it between the first 3-4 seconds going up to 10 seconds, yeah. Usually.
Yeah, usually. And sometimes it varies so much with the northern lights. As you can see, it's quite active on the top right hand of the frame, while on the mid left part, not as much. So, and you can see some blurring going on here, and that is the 10-second shutter working. The same here with, okay, sorry. You can see some movement going on because these are moving so fast. If I was using a lower shutter speed and a higher ISO, I would get thinner lines here, but not as much northern lights going on. It would be a different shot, really. And I might not be able to capture the purplish color going on here. So it's really a balancing act always when photographing the northern lights when they are moving fast. When the northern lights are moving slow, like in the previous image, like this one, when the northern lights are moving slow like this, you will have, of course, some bends and some curtains going on. But the northern light show here was not about the curtains. So here I could actually use a longer shutter speed and still be able to capture a very similar image. And normally when I'm out now these days shooting, I'm working very more advanced than I used to back in the day. I've learned more about compositional process, the visual flow, also the technical part, what I'm able to do in post, what I should do in camera. So what I did in this particular image, I used both my knowledge of post-processing and camera techniques, in this case, focus stacking and time-lapse. So what I do here is I find a composition that I know will work as best possible in regards of where I am. I put my camera in time-lapse mode because the northern lights will move around. They will have different shapes, different patterns. They can fizzle out for all I know, or even burst into stronger northern lights. So I use a time-lapse setting here. I have my camera. I will not use the time-lapse in itself. I use it for getting the best possible northern lights going on. When I am sure that I have a good show going on in the sky, I will then focus stack my way all the way to the bottom part of my frame in order to have everything in sharp detail. In this particular image as well, because I'm using a longer shutter speed, the branches here in the trees, they will move. And for this particular northern lights capture, I had some branches moving here. So I had to use a darks 3 or maybe 4 luminosity mask with a different capture, and just to paint in the sharp branch going here. because it would make no difference to the northern lights, since I'm only targeting the darker parts of the trees or the silhouettes. And of course, the focus tag in here in the pond, you will just have to either find a decently sharp image for the reflection, or maybe even just hand paint them in. You can, I did not do this for the particular shot here, but if you flip your image, you can actually paint it in with, I think if you use a multiply mask, you can flip your image, use a multiply mask, and you will get darker lights here, and just paint them in using a lower opacity, and you will get some more reflections going on. At this time, I did not know that, so it's a process for me as well, and it's a very it is easy to capture the northern lights. It's more difficult when you need to apply focus stacking, HDR effects when you have northern lights going on like this. Say if I blew the highlights here, I would need to do a shot more without the blown highlights, and I would need just to paint in the brightest parts when they are not overexposed.
But Tor, how dark is actually that scene in the foreground? How do you approach the focus stacking when it's really dark? You just manually turn?
Really good question, Hans. What I do for focus stacking, since I live in northern Norway, and there are very few photographers in this particular area, I use my head torch, and I will place, oh yeah, sorry, I need to, do you guys see my, the zoom tool here now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So what I do here, in practical terms, I will focus on infinity. I do that through my live view now. My camera is able to capture and see the stars. So I focus on the stars, get them as pin sharp as possible. Then I know that I am in actual infinity focus. It's easy to miss focus, and these days I get super annoyed when I do, because it's just a tiny little twitch on the zoom ring, and you will be out of focus even though it looks sharp on your LCD. So I pay very particular I pay a lot of focus into that I get my stars sharp. In that way, you will also see a noticeable difference in the ridge of any mountains going on. If you miss focus, the stars are a little bit blurry. When you zoom in on the mountain, when you get back home and can see your 40 or so megapixel or whatever, however many megapixels you have, you can see that the ridge of your mountain is actually bleeding in to the northern lights, and it does not look very good when printed. For seeing it on web, it's more forgiving, I think, but it's annoying to know that your focus is out, that you've missed your focus, especially when the northern lights are going crazy. I've had many nights in the beginning with good northern lights where I actually missed focus, and well, it's a sad day the day after.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I think, yeah, it's a, what you're saying, because I have also experienced it. Some slight, you don't even know, you click it and a little jerk here or there, little touch on the ring, and you are out of focus, and you don't even remember that you did a mistake, and you come back home and you look into your computer and it's all gone. It's all ruined.
yeah, exactly. And in regards of focusing for the interest of the viewers, I would say that it's dark, you will need to manually focus for the stars. Make sure your stars are as tiny as possible. What I do, I use my live view because my camera allows me to. It varies from the ISO sensitivity of your camera if you're able to see through your viewfinder what's going on. I find one bright star, as you can see in this image here, if I zoom in, these two stars here are bigger and brighter than, well, the rest of what I can see. Right. So these you will able to see in your viewfinder if you have a camera from the last 2 years or so. Or if you don't, you need to use your viewfinder and make sure that the star here is as pin sharp as possible, meaning it is at its smallest. You know when it's at its smallest because if you continue turning your zoom ring, you will see that your star get bloated. Mm-hmm. And then you have known you've gone too far and you just twitch it back just a little bit and you will get your star back in perfect focus. And when your star is in perfect focus, your ridge of any mountain will also be in perfect focus.
Very good point.
That's a very good point, Tor. Tor, unfortunately, we've overshot by half an hour almost. So we can, I think, start getting into the question answer session with both of you. I think that will be, that otherwise we'll miss out on that as well.
If I can have 2 more minutes, I can just explain my focusing here. So manual focus for the stars. I use my head torch and autofocus for the mid-ground and foreground. Okay. I point my head torch here, autofocus on a part of the image that is not too bright because the head torch will blow the highlights and you will not be able to autofocus. Autofocus here. You can use a longer shutter speed at f5.6 to get more depth going on. Mm. And then I do the same thing in the very close foreground with also autofocus. That is the only time I use autofocus at night. It's in the combination with my head torch for focus stacking purposes. All right.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And remember to turn off your head torch after you've hit focus.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
All right, I'll stop my screen share now.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that was quite a phenomenal session by both of you, Hans and quite knowledgeable for me in particular, even with the Northern Lights, and there's a lot of information that I was not aware of, and I think amazing. So it's been, we've already we've gone past the time, but anyways, it's been a phenomenal session so far, and people are all sticking on. So I will first, before we move on with the questions, I think I'll first ask the question by Martin to Hans, and the second question, I think I don't want to miss out on that because he's taking to write a mail to me and requested me to specially ask to you.
Yeah.
So he's asking, the second question is, where do you see yourself as a photographer in 5 years of time? Any particular fields within photography you would like to further explore, or any special projects or plans?
Well, I hope in 5 years' time, I hope I have visited Tor and he had shown me some Northern Lights. That's one goal, I guess. I need some more greens in my portfolio. I don't think I have so much ambitious plans in landscape photography, but I would really just like to keep on pursuing my passion and maybe visiting other places as well. I've been planning a trip to Iceland with my friends, so probably that will happen. We'll see how the corona situation plays out. So yeah, what's the other question, Jassi? I didn't remember.
Pardon?
What was the other question?
So no, he's just asking that where do you see yourself in 5 years of time? So.
Yeah. Well, I just I think that I will just keep on doing the same thing as do now, actually. But maybe I've been travel more to more of those big locations like the Faroes and Iceland and maybe the Dolomites or something. I would really enjoy that. So and meet up with like-minded people like yourself, and I must meet Tor Ivar soon. That's for sure. So I guess I'll just keep on.
All right. But there's another question coming to my mind, probably as an extension to what he's asking, and I think you both can answer. Is that today there was a time in landscape photography when people, the photographers were emerging and they were really creating their own, they were bringing their own kind of taste and flavor to landscape photography. And names are, we can just keep on naming this. The list is huge. But today we have almost everybody clicking top-notch images, and not to ridicule anybody's hard work, but that's a fact that because of the access to beautiful locations, the technology, so many tutorials available, and everybody's eagerness to learn, the images are really stunning. So how do you see this landscape photography kind of platform growing from here? Where do you see it evolving from here? Um, is it not getting difficult for every landscape photographer to really stand out today?
Yeah, do you want to go on that one, Tor, at first?
Yeah.
So a trend that has been going on, it's a two-way street as I see it. You will have those pursuing the grand landscapes, emulating and even straight down copying other compositions. And Alex Noriega said it very well, because you can stand in one spot, say in the Lofoten Islands on the Hamnøy Bridge with the sea lodges. The only thing maybe that's different is the light and how you process it. The composition will be the same, because it's a well-known image. Everyone wants it. You will see in a location like that, you will have 30, 40 people standing on the same place, capturing the same image from, well, with very little difference. And you have the other street of photographers going into more creative styles, where you can focus on intimate landscape. For example, like Hans showed you before, you have Rachel Talibat focusing on wave photography. It will be uniquely yours every time, more or less. So hard to copy. You will have the post-processing technique that you develop yourself to your own taste, but you will have the mainstream thing that is leading you into these photography hotspots like Grand Canyon, Patagonia, all those places. So I think, and I hope that more and more people will dive into the creative part of photography, because there's one thing of documenting a scene and another one of creating a photograph. And using a different lens on a hotspot will many times give you a unique perspective on that same place. You can, of course, shoot the normal scene just to have it, but well knowingly that what you have captured have been done a million times before, being able to pull something unique from that is super, super difficult. So changing up your choice of lens, choice of perspective will, of course, give you a creative and personal touch to those photography hotspots. I think it's all about unlocking your own creativity instead of emulating others. Emulating others is nice in the beginning to learn. I've traveled many times abroad photographing hotspots. What I've learned when I come back home is to compose my images better, being able to create something that hasn't been done before.
All right. That's a nice answer. How about you, Hans?
Yeah, I think that Tor answered that very well. I think there will always be people that are just aiming for the hotspot and the well-known locations to get attention-grabbing images that will do well on social media and so on. And I think that it's typical for the beginners in landscape photography to go to well-known locations because they all want to get those amazing shots they have seen. And I think it's a good thing to learn that way and to kind of not copy but be very inspired by photographers you look up to and try to analyze how they approach the scene and how they do it. But I think there comes a time when you have done that enough that you want to dive deeper into the world of nature landscape and you want to maybe approach the intimate scenes and the smaller scenes, more abstract stuff, and step more into the fine art side of it. So I guess it's if you want to stand out, you have to go your own way, and maybe the smaller scene and the intimate and the creative stuff is the way to go.
Yeah, wonderful answer. Any panelists wants to ask anything?
I just have a short question for both of you. So what is the next tough thing that you would be undertaking in next couple of days or months or years, probably?
You mean after their previous shot or after this session?
No. No. Coming up.
Yeah, so for me, my plan ahead is to shoot more locally. I've used Google Earth a lot now to scout out locations that are not, well, there are no paths to these places. Just to get, because you can use Google Earth these days, and you can also use like the ground mode, just to get a sense of what it will look like if you're standing there. So I've used Google Earth a few times to find locations to see how will this look if I use my camera, or do I need a drone to be able to capture a new perspective of a local scene. I have my experience has been, especially the Faroe Islands gave me a sense of what I need to do back home in order to create something unique here. Because in the Faroe Islands, you would jump in a car, you will drive for 2 hours to one place, you will hike for another 3 hours to get to the location you want. If I use the same effort back home, I can get to so many places. I just need to get out over that doorstep, which is super hard when you're back home because there's so many things to do.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's another thing that that Tor and me, we are just doing landscape photography as a hobby. We have full-time works and family and kids and so on. So it's a balance act to to have time to travel and to do photography. So it's not easy to be able to get out so much as you want to actually. But I think that I'm gonna try to explore some areas that are within 4 or 5 hours drive from my home, maybe around Western Norway somewhere. So that I can take some weekends off and do some short trips. So probably do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody? Prakash, Som, Sandeep?
Oh, I'm good.
Anybody? Okay, so
Oh, no, I asked my questions as and when I saw the images. So
now I have one question to both of them probably. No, first, let me ask Thor regarding his aurora images. Now I know that how unpredictable auroras are. So so you just cannot, even though you know where the KPI is, where the KPI is strong, and where you might get into the prediction also, and you might even do the recce as well. But there could be some times where you reach there, you have the composition place ready, your spot ready, but aurora just doesn't show up there. And how do you manage that? How do you manage to still ensure that you get the right composition without obviously getting into blending modes and all, and time blending and all, or taking two different shots for the foreground and use aurora as the second image? Without doing that, how do you still manage? Is it easy? You are able to predict it much better or no?
Yeah, so when you come to a location, the northern lights will normally be at a specific place in the skies, if it's north or south or overhead. So knowing that, you will have a base for your composition. If you haven't been to the location before, yeah, you will have to just well, find a composition. It sounds stupidly easy, but the northern lights is in one place normally, and it will go in waves south, north, from the original place it is in the sky. Knowing that, you will need to look for something that complements that sky. So depending on where you're going, sometimes it's not possible at all, because you might be in a situation where behind you will have a lot of buildings and ambient light coming, shining through from that direction. And sometimes there simply isn't a composition. It is as rough as that. So in the dark, you sometimes you're lucky. You will probably benefit from going there earlier in the day, because when you're driving your car, depending on what kind of situation you are in when chasing the northern lights, I live here. I know where like there are ponds. I know where there are streams, so I can just select where I'm going as in relation to where the northern lights are. If you're not familiar with the location you're in, maybe you've seen something as you were driving, but do keep in mind that there are there are houses more or less in every fjord. So it's difficult here to shoot a clean scene unless you're shooting from a higher altitude, because there are always someone who has built a house at a random location, especially near the fjords.
All right. Thank you, Thor. My last question is to Hans. And Hans, you started photography very late, and we've already seen your progression, and we probably now know that what are the reasons behind that. Now looking back, would you have done something differently in terms of photography, in terms of your decisions regarding your post-processing techniques or whatever? Do you think that you would have done something slightly different from what you've done to reach here?
Well, I think that I'm a strong believer in that you have to actually jump a bit into things and just take it as it comes, you know. And I think that a lot of this to get the understanding of the light and the basics of photography is exercise and doing stuff. So it takes time, I think. It really does. But something that I would like to change when I see my earliest images is that I think that they may be a bit too saturated and maybe a bit too have a slightly warm cast to it. That's what I can see now in retrospect. So I try not to make that mistake now in my images I do now. So maybe I should also be more open to travel more a bit earlier, you know, just not doing so many shots locally. It's I mean, it's when I went to Lofoten Islands, it was so much easier to photograph than back home because of the locations was kind of, you know, the scene was all laid out for you. So yeah, maybe I should just been a bit more bold and traveled some more and so on. But I think that it also it takes time to get to understand, and you need experience, and you need to make your own faults. And I think that's as long as you learn from your mistakes, you will be fine. So that's maybe the best way to learn.
All right.
Wonderful answer.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Tor.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Tor. Thank you, everybody out there on YouTube, and for this wonderful session. And before we go off air, before we take the selfie, let me announce that these days we are having some back-to-back sessions. And so tomorrow we have one Indian top-notch wedding photographer lined up in one-on-one chat with me. There is not going to be any panel tomorrow. It's going to be heart-to-heart talk with him. So and so please don't forget to join me and him tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. So I think now everybody thumbs up so that we can take the screenshot. Thumbs up and smile. Yeah, everybody. Yeah, Tor. Yeah. Wonderful. All right. And thank you, Hans. Thank you, Tor. It's been an enlightening session today. And thank you, Som, Sandeep, Himadri, Prakash, and everybody out there for sticking by. And it's been so much of learning and so much of inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Tor.
Thank you.
Nice
Bye-bye.
meeting you.
Thank you so much.
See you. Thank
Stay
you.
safe, everyone.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.